invite to the podium Dr. Yorgos Nikolopoulos, who's going to talk about authentication in QKD. Dr. Yorgos Nikolopoulos received his PhD in 2001 from the University of Crete. His PhD work was focused on the dissipative dynamics of small quantum systems. In 2019, he was invited to participate as a Mercator Fellow in SFB Crossing, cryptography-based security solution enabling trust in new and next-generation computing environments. Dr. Nikolopoulos joined ISL 4 as a junior researcher in 2007. Dr. Nikolopoulos, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody. I am Georgios Nikolopoulos. I'm at ISL 4, and I have been working on quantum cryptography in general for the last 20 years. I can cover different topics, but today I will stick to authentication in QKD protocols. And, let me start with the main steps in a typical QKD protocol. We have initially quantum communication where we exchange quantum signals. And at the end of this process, we have the establishment of a raw key. This raw key is post-processed classically in order to obtain at the end a secret truly random key. The typical post-processing involves key shifting, error reconciliation, verification that the error reconciliation has succeeded, and if it has succeeded, then we go to privacy amplification, and the purpose of privacy amplification is to decorrelate an eavesdropper completely from the final key. If the error reconciliation has not succeeded, then we go back and we start all over again. Any QKD protocol is susceptible to a very simple attack. The attack is a man-in-the-middle attack. Here is the typical interconnection between two users, so I'm going to stick mainly on a point-to-point communication scenario. We have two users, Alice and Bob, and two channels, the quantum channel and the service channel. So what an eavesdropper can do in the man-in-the-middle attack, she cuts the line, and she establishes a quantum channel, the service channel with Alice, and the two channels with Bob. And now she can run a QKD session with Alice where she pretends to be Bob, and one QKD session with Bob where she pretends to be Alice. At the end of this process, she will establish two different keys, one with Alice and one with Bob, and thus she can intercept any communication between them. So what can we do? The answer is authentication. So any QKD protocol that you can buy relies on authentication. And the authentication takes place usually in key shifting, in error verification, and at the end in privacy amplification, and the confirmation, the verification, if you want, that we have a final key. Of course, this may change from protocol to protocol, but the idea is here. You need an authentication in order to run a QKD protocol. So the bottom line is that the security of the final key that you will extract from a QKD protocol is affected by the authentication that you will use. If we are interested, because we hear that QKD protocols offer information theoretic security and so on, then if we are interested in information theoretic security, then what we need is unconditional secure message authentication codes, or else MACs. So what is a MAC? A MAC is just an algorithm that I schematically present here. So I have two users, Alice and Bob, who share a secret truly random key. And they want now, Alice wants to send a message M to Bob. She does not interested in hiding this message, but since she's interested in Bob knowing that this message has originated from Alice. So we have data origin authentication. Now, in order to achieve this task, Alice takes the message and the key, she passes through an algorithm, and she obtains a tag that I do not hear in this way. The tag, therefore, is a function that depends on both the key and the message. Now, she transmits the message and the tag to Bob, and Bob now knows the key. He runs the same algorithm in order to obtain his own tag. The tag may be different if the message has been altered by an eavesdropper. So he compares the tags, and if they agree, he accepts the message. Otherwise, he rejects it. There are unconditional secure MACs, which are of interest in our case for QKD. And there is a fundamental theorem here, which states that if we want to have an epsilon secure, epsilon here means a very small quantity, n time epsilon secure MAC, then we have to have keys of length n+1 log epsilon. So for the case of QKD, a one-time epsilon secure MAC suffices. This can be provided by the Wegmark-Carter construction, and it uses epsilon almost universal hash functions. Each hash function is identified by the secret key that is shared between the users. So if we want to summarize what we have so far, in order to have information theoretically secure QKD, we need unconditional secure MACs, we need almost strongly universal hash functions, and this means that we need a pre-shared secret key between Alice and Bob. But then the question arises, how do we distribute the pre-shared key in a QKD protocol? And what happens in the case of many users? For example, if you see here a large network with n users, then you see that we need pre-shared keys which scale quadratically with the number of users. Moreover, if you want to add a new user in the network, then you have to make sure that this new user shares n-1 different keys with the other users, which is a difficult task. One way to circumvent this difficulty is to introduce a trusted key distribution center. And in this case, each user has to pre-share a secret key with the trusted node only. In commercially available QKD systems, what happens usually is that the users have to generate a secret key and pass it into the boxes in order to run the QKD session for the first time. What we propose here and what we intend to investigate with our collaborators in LSQCI is to use physical and clonable functions in order to facilitate the generation and the management of pre-shared keys in QKD systems. So what is a physical and clonable function? This is a device with internal disorder which is hard to clone or to simulate. It is typically used for ID counterfeiting, random number generation, and smart cards. So the typical operation is the following. The PAF takes as an input a challenge, it produces a response, and the response now is processed classically in order to result in a binary key. The nature of the challenge and the response depends on the physical and clonable, on the token, the physical and clonable function under consideration. As you see here, there are different unclonable functions. There are functions, electronic paths, there are optical paths, there are nanotech paths, biological paths, and so on. They have different characteristics. The protocol we intend to use in order to integrate the paths in a typical QKD system is the following. A pair of QKD devices, we have two users, I said Bob, so they need two boxes, the receiver box and the center box. So a pair of QKD boxes is associated with a pair of paths. A trusted party now, we always have a trusted party in this context. We have, for example, the vendor, creates a database of challenge response pairs. And how they do this is the following. We have two paths. We have a number of challenges. For each challenge, we interrogate the paths and we obtain two keys. Now, these two keys are binary keys, so we can add them addition modulo 2 in order to obtain the joint key. So each challenge, the joint key, is stored in a database. When the QKD boxes are delivered to the users, then the path source are also given to the users. And one of them, for example, Alice here, has access also to the database. Now, when they want to run the QKD session for the first time, they have to establish a pre-shared key in order to run the authentication protocol. And to do this, they can operate as following. Alice chooses at random a challenge from the path. Let's say that she chooses the jth challenge. So she sends the challenge to Bob. Now Alice and Bob interrogate their paths independently with the same challenge, the jth one, in order to obtain the individual keys, KJA and KJB. But now Alice has access to the database, so she can add her key to the joint key, and then she obtains Bob's key. Now, Bob's key in this schematic presentation is the joint key, is the common key, it's secret key, which can be used in the QKD session. So, what are the advantages in this scheme? It can offer information theoretically secure QKD session, assuming that the numerical key that is produced from a path is truly random. And indeed, there are many scientific works where they have studied this issue. They show that the keys pass all the typical randomness tests that we have available. Now, the second requirement are that the legitimate users never make their paths available to other parties. So it's their secret. It's like your credit card. You don't give it to anybody. So, the third requirement is that each entry in the database is used only once. So when a challenge is used, then it is deleted from the database. Under these three conditions, essentially the database is unconditionally secure by virtue of the one-time pad encryption. Of course, here I have considered only 2 users for the sake of simplicity, but the whole protocol can be extended to many users using a trusted key node. I will not analyze this more. I just want to enter 2 other issues here. The first question one may ask is whether one can authenticate quantum messages. Because in QKD protocols, we exchange qubits at the beginning. So can we authenticate these qubits? The answer is yes, you can do it, but it is very, very expensive. Because by contrast to classical MACs, in order to authenticate quantum messages, you have also to encrypt them. For example, in order to authenticate m qubit message, you need also m plus s qubits, which means if you take into account that during a QKD you exchange millions of qubits, then you understand how expensive this becomes. Another question is the following. Can we authenticate a classical message using quantum means? The answer is yes, of course. You can consider a similar algorithm with the classical MACs, but now the tag is now quantum state. We have investigated this question recently, and we saw that under these conditions, in symmetric prepared measure QMAX, they cannot do better than classical MACs. So classical MACs are just fine for our work. The last question I want to raise is what happens with PQC? Ooristen? Εντάξει, τελειώνω. Ευχαριστώ, Βαγγέλη. What happens with PQC? Of course, it has been investigated, and PQC can be used in order to deliver a pre-shared key in the users, which can be then used in QKD session. They use a digital signature algorithm, like the one was discussed before. The main advantages are that they provide an efficient key management because it is compatible with classical computers. Unfortunately, there are 2 main disadvantages. The disadvantages is that PQC offers computational security. So when it is integrated into the QKD system, we don't have any information theoretic security anymore. What we have is computational security only of the final key. So in a sense, it diminishes. In a sense, it diminishes the security of the QKD protocol. So this is the end of the few slides I prepared for you. And the message that I want you to take home is the following, that QKD essentially is a quantum key expansion protocol. It's not a quantum key distribution protocol. So you need to have a secret pre-shared key, which is then expanded using quantum mechanics. And in order to do that, in order to deliver a pre-shared key, you can use physical accountable functions. This is one way. You can use other means. Perhaps you can also use PQC. But if you use PQC, then you have to investigate the security of the final key that you extract from QKD, because it is not information theoretical security anymore. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Nikolopoulos, for the presentation and for being brief, because we really need the time. I wonder if there are any questions. No? Okay, yes. Oh.
So if we need a pre-shared key, what is really the advantage of quantum key distribution?
Yes. This pre-shared key is short. It's typically short. You don't need a very large key because you use hash functions. The hash functions can be identified with a very small key. Now, this key is expanded through the QKD. I mean, cryptography is basically a whole ecosystem. It has different tasks. One task is the distribution. Another task is the key expansion. Other task is the random number generation. Other task is digital signatures. Other task is encryption, and so on. So you don't have something that solves everything. Now you are looking for protocols which are combined together to do something. Now in this case, you have a protocol of authentication which is unconditional secure, but does not provide key distribution or key expansion. Now you combine it with QKD, and you get a key distribution and a key expansion protocol.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question and the reply. Are there any more questions? Oh, yes, over there. Yes, please. Oh, it's a long way, but it will work.
Thanks. Quick. Okay, yeah, it's working. Quick question. So, for a reasonable security level, what's the typical ratio of how much key you need to spend for the Mac, and how much you're actually generating?
Okay. Yes, I mean, I think some numbers from theoretical works, because to be honest, I have not seen a rigorous analysis from the vendors or from the companies or whatever. But because I'm a scientist, so I read papers, okay? So from papers that I have read, they estimate something like you start from 128 or 256 bits, and then you expand it. And of course, this is always the key question that you have to answer, that if the losses in the channel or other imperfections are such that you consume a lot of bits in order to do error correction, privacy amplification, authentication, and at the end of the day, you have consumed more than you have started, it does not make any sense. But the typical number is what, if I remember correctly, is what I told you. It's like 128 or 256 bits that you start with, and then you expand it. The more you run, the more you expand.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Are there any more? If not, I would like to thank Dr. Nikolopoulos again.